This is Into the Absurd, Episode 3, with Kevin Donahue. He's an avid lucid dreamer, and I think a little bit of a mystic enthusiast, if I might ask.
Yeah, so I really enjoy reading about different religions and different spiritualities and trying to connect them in my, like as far as I understand them, to find the similarities between them all. And I thought it was interesting that, like, as you dive deeper into every spiritual practice that is known, um, every single one of them almost has a mystic tradition or a mystical side. And as you go further and further down into the mystical traditions of each religion, they start to sound very, very similar. And I thought that was like super interesting to know and to learn about, because like why are they so similar? Um, as you go down, and these are including traditions that are from completely different continents who have had no contact with one another. But as you go deeper down into their sort of mystic schools of thought, where there's like a lot of deep prayer and deep meditation and trance work, and even things such as psychedelics involved, you start to notice that their understanding of the universe is very similar. They just choose to use different names for things, such as like their deities or the creation. But as you look past those superficial differentiations, they tend to have like a lot of similarities. So I think that's very interesting to learn about personally.
And this kind of all ties into just like finding a unity with God or this higher power, the
Yeah,
universe.
you could call it God or a higher power or the universe, or you could just find it. You could just call it finding unity with yourself and understanding like what's your role here. And even if you don't believe that there is, for example, some role designated to you by some higher power, I think it's worthwhile for everyone to start to explore like their own consciousness and their own mind, so that they can figure out like, okay, like what am I here for, and like what do I have to give to humanity and to the planet. So I sort of like to take it out of the esoteric realm of like magic words and secret practices, and put it more into like the living rooms where of people's lives, where they can actually like apply certain methods and knowledge to actually benefit them in their normal life, instead of making them feel like they have to go and, you know, visit some far off temple in order to find, the secrets of the universe, because that's just not necessary um, for the modern man, and it's not practical.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess you don't really need all the woo woo.
Yeah, the thing is like most religions and most spiritual traditions, as they're grasping to understand reality as it presents itself to them, of course they're going to use words that make sense as far as their cultural background. So if we take like the Christian understanding of the world, um, the early tribes that Christianity developed out of, they were unable to see a higher power that was not a man or a male figure, because in their society, males dominated basically everything. So for them, authority was synonymous with masculinity and like malehood. So they could not conceive of a god that was not even personified as either a male or a female, um, let alone uh, just like encompassing all things. They had to project their own ideas of authority onto a male figure, and so they worship that figure. And this has happened in multiple religions, where they take their own understanding of themselves, and then they project it outward into deities and uh, angels and spirits. Um, they're just taking their own psychology and almost forcing it onto the universe itself, thinking that the universe has to abide by their ideas of personhood and personality. not understanding that it could probably uh, go beyond their ideas of intellectual knowledge and spiritual understanding. And in that way, I find myself drawn to Buddhism the most. I feel like it's closest to the truth, while I don't accept it as like a soul truth, just because Buddhism has been able to recognize the flaws we make as humans and how we project our inner ideas out onto the universe and then force the universe to mold into those ideas. They've done a good job at doing the work to understand that like their their deities and their figures uh, are all just symbols, and they understand them as symbols that they use to be able to connect to these ideas in a deeper level without necessarily believing that, oh, these are actual deities or things out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's this certain what you're saying, that there's a certain personification,
Right.
right? Like we all, at least most of us, I mean, I would even say atheists do. We all believe in this higher power, right?
Mm-hmm.
This these fundamental laws that can't be broken in the universe, right?
Right.
These things that are much bigger than ourselves, much beyond what the concept of bigger even is,
Right.
right? And so I guess we would naturally personify this idea as God, is what you're saying, and you are drawn to Buddhism in the sense that you just feel that it just feels natural to you.
Yeah, they're able to use the symbols of, they're able to use their personifications of what is bigger than themselves, but they're also able to understand that these are personifications. They're not necessarily the absolute truth. Um, Whereas I feel like other spiritual traditions can sometimes fall into the trap where, because they can't understand a power outside of like a personhood, as far as um, an entity or being that is like a human, they just can't conceive of something like that. So they just project their own ideas of personality and intelligence onto the whole system. Um, and it makes sense though why they do that, because we know only humanhood and we know only our personhood. It's hard for us to conceive of these things. It makes sense. Um, but many, I feel like, traditions fall into the trap of taking their personification, their own symbolism, and then choosing to be like, oh, this is the absolute truth. There's no if, and, or buts about it. Whereas Buddhism, I feel like, tends to, um, they know that they're using symbolism. And so, in a way, they're able to transcend their own symbolism, using it only as stepping stones to like a deeper understanding of the truth as far as they're concerned with what that is.
And you started off as a Catholic, right? When you were young.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I did fully identify with the Catholic faith for a very long time in my life. Um, but my father used to have conversations with me as I was getting older, like, 12, 13 years old, where he would start to introduce me to ideas that went counter to the traditional understanding of like God and higher consciousness. And I remember one conversation specifically where we were laughing. We were on vacation and we were just laughing together in a circle, me and my family and him. And he just said, "Remember, Kevin, God is love. God is love itself." He said, "It's not a man in the sky or a woman in the sky. It's not anyone in the sky. It is this moment. It's this moment where you feel like when you're laughing and when you're with people that you love." And so that idea like blew my mind. I was like, what the hell? Like, what the hell is this? What does this mean? And I would contemplate it like very often. I'd be like, what does it mean that God is love and like God is everything? God is laughter. And I started to like question like my faith, as far as my Catholic understanding of the faith. But I remained in the understanding of a higher power, I just began to realize that what I have been taught about that might not necessarily be the truth as far as my Catholic faith and the traditional viewpoint of it was concerned.
And I guess so. You're also interested in Taoism.
Yeah, I really like Taoism because I feel like the main message or one of the main themes of Taoism is to follow the true nature of things and to at least try to figure out uh, what the nature of things are. And because in nature itself, everything moves in this orderly way. Even the chaotic things, um, after they've done their like damage, they end up contributing to some kind of growth and expansion of some kind. So nature just follows this pattern where it seems like everything is so orderly, and I think humans follow that same pattern. But as we developed a sort of very strong intellectual understanding of the world through evolution, we I feel like over time lost sense of our deep abiding connection to everything around us. And so that's why we see us, you know, building all these factories that are destroying the earth and participating in all these practices worldwide that are detrimental to the planet and to us as human beings. And so I really like Taoism because it encourages people to begin to try to find that harmony with the version of themselves that is in line with nature versus the version of themselves that has been sort of twisted by the intellect to be something that we're not truly supposed to be expressing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I listened to the Tao Te Ching this morning actually, and I think my favorite part of the whole book is the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao.
I agree completely with that quote because when we try to name and label things, we're just using our intellectual mind to take something that's way beyond the intellect, and we're trying to put it in these pretty nicely fitted boxes with a ribbon on top because that's the way humans like to see things go. We like to have things very compartmentalized. We we like things in like a step by step order, and we like things to be, you know, cut and paste, like very easy to understand. But when you take something that's like the universe itself and consciousness, that thing doesn't fit into the ideas that the intellect holds. And so I think what Lao Tzu was trying to say when he said the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, he's just expressing that if we were to come up with a name for it, it would only be because we need that name for it, but it is beyond all names. It's beyond all boxes that we could ever hope to put on it, if that makes sense.
It is beyond the human intellect.
Beyond the human intellect.
And for people that don't know, the Tao translates to the path.
Yeah, the path or the way. Just yeah, the nature, yeah,
The fundamental nature of all that is and all that is not.
right. Yeah, I agree.
And what's really interesting is the Yin and Yang symbol. Um, I was doing some research on the Yin and Yang, and I couldn't help but to think of Sir Isaac Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. And this idea is not new at all, right?
Right.
The Yin and Yang, it kind of represents this action without action, right?
Yeah, I think with Taoism, a very important point that they make is this idea of effortless action, which for us Westerners, we don't understand what that means. Like, how can you have an effortless action? But the way I understand it through Taoism is that if you get in tune with your own nature, the actions that you begin taking are so natural and they just seem to flow out from you that you are making progress in the world and you're contributing to the world, but it doesn't feel like work. Whereas when you're trying so hard to work hard, trying to attain some goal or outcome, you end up almost stalemating yourself because you're not flowing with the natural way that action should arise, which is this effortless um, sort of way
A flow.
of flow. Yeah. And that whole idea that you mentioned of like the ideas of motion are not new. And with the yin and the yang, um, they are in flow. And I like to think of them as dancing together. A lot of people tend to put like labels on things and label some things good and other things bad. And they see like the yin and yang almost trying to fight each other. Like good is in this eternal war with evil, but I choose not to see it that way, as neither do the Taoists or the Buddhists. They see it as this dance, and that when you can truly understand that there is a dance going on, that all of what you perceive to be evil is actually contributing to the good, and that you can almost not even, you get so deep that you can't even make a distinction between bad and good, is when you realize that the whole thing was just one to begin with. Because the one of the main purposes of Taoism is to they offer the idea of duality as a starting point, the yin and the yang, the bad and the good, but the ultimate goal is to understand the non-duality of all things, how there is no good or bad, there just is. um and I tend to agree with that the more I age and like learn and grow.
And that's because the yin is within the yang and the yang is
Yeah,
within the yin.
they both are in each other and they both create each other. It's like the idea of like you can't have dark without light, because the light creates, the shadows on everything, but you can't have one without the other. And everything is the same thing in nature. Like for example, light and dark are the same. It's just the degree of light that is there or not there. In like with hot and cold, there it's just the degree of heat that is either there or not there. But there's no such thing as a substance called cold. There's only heat and the lack of heat, and the lack of heat we call cold. So everything is the same thing. They just vary by the degree. And when you truly understand that and how that applies to almost every situation and every phenomenon that you see in your life, you start to realize that these things are not dual. They're not against each other. They are each other and they form each other. And then you move into this understanding of like oneness, how everything is one and it's the same thing, though it seems to be two opposite things.
Hmm. I think the way I like to think of oneness is if you were to fly out of the entire universe and look back in, you'd see a little tiny dot.
Yeah, I really like that imagery, because if you were I like it because we as we're here as humans, we look about around the world and we see so much like separation, either between people or groups of people, and even just between us and the chair that sits across from us. Like we see ourselves as like, um we're sitting here and the chair is sitting there. But if you were to be able to fly out far enough in space, you would see the entire earth as a single point with no space.
What's
So
that pale blue dot?
it's just a pale blue, yeah, it'd
Yeah.
be a pale blue dot. And from there is no distinction between the distance between me and the chair that sits across from me. From that perspective is negligible. I can't even say it. It
Nothing.
doesn't matter. It's nothing from that perspective. It only matters because we perceive it where we are at. But if you were to zoom out of everything, everything would be one. And then if you were to zoom out and say that you could somehow leave the universe entirely, even though I don't think that's possible yet, um, you would see the universe itself as a single point. And so even though the sun is, you know, however many light years away from Earth, um, millions of miles or whatever, it would be a single, the distance between the sun and earth would be nothing compared to that outside point that you're perceiving it as. So everything does become one if you were to have this outside perspective where you were zoomed out and were able to see the big picture.
But there's also just a little bit of duality, right? With the individual and oneness.
Can you expand on what you mean by duality?
What I mean is we're all one, but we're also all individuals.
Right. I my constitution, my personal constitution, is that I do believe that oneness and having an identity do not have to contradict each other. Whereas many traditions see that there is only oneness, and you cannot have oneness without you can only have oneness if you don't have identity, or vice versa. You can't have identity without oneness, and that's why you see a lot of traditions like Buddhism seeking to almost eradicate the ego or the part of us that sees separation in search for this experience where you experience everything as one all the time. And the reason I feel like they can coexist is because you can have an identity, you can know that you are who you are or what you are, and still understand that you who you are is still having a constant interaction with the whole itself. If we take this down to very simple terms, into human terms, and we take our bodies for example, you have your own body. So you as Greg have your own body, and I have my own body. But every moment, the cells of our body are exchanging molecules with the air around us, and every moment we're breathing in air and molecules from the air around us, and then giving them out, and those are then going out and interacting with the world as a whole as well. And on another level, as we speak, pheromones are coming out of my body and affecting you, and pheromones are coming out of your body and affecting me and the whole room. So anyone who comes into this room is going to have some level of something that you produced affecting them, even if they're not there at the same time as you. So, but that doesn't mean like you're not Greg anymore or I'm not Kevin. It's just we know that we're a part of this whole system, and that it is all a big giant interaction. But we do have a personal identity, even if we can understand that we are all just energy at a very basic level. There is no, once you get down to a very subatomic level, there's no, they can't find any distinction between the element of water, for example, or the element of fire. They're the same. They're the same substance. They just, the frequency that they vibrate at gives them a different appearance in physical terms. So one, but they're the same energy. But you wouldn't sit there and try to put a fire out by, pouring more fire on it, just because you know that at a basic level, the water and fire are made out of the same thing, but they're expressing their basic energy in a different way, in the way our physical system seems to be composed. So things have their individual identity, but that does not negate the fact that they are also one and the same with the whole, as far as I perceive it.
We're all made out of the same thing.
We're all made out of the same thing. And that same thing just sort of divides itself as far as only perception is concerned into things of varying degrees and natures. So it seems like there's like a Kevin or a Greg, and there is us, or else we wouldn't be sitting here having this experience. But those distinctions that we make between me and you are very arbitrary, and they only matter to me and you. But they because they're even here, they matter. If identity didn't matter at all, I believe it wouldn't have evolved in the first place. We would have had a hive mind like the bees, where they don't necessarily see themselves as individual creatures. They see themselves as a collective, and they do everything for the queen, and it's all about the survival of the hive itself. Now humans are very much the same way. Like we want the survival of the human race, but just because we have an identity with the whole of the human race doesn't mean that we don't understand our own place in things. I know where I'm at in this room, and you know where you're at in this room, and we don't get confused. And I don't think I'm sitting where you're at, and you don't think you're sitting where I'm at. But we do have this understanding that we are a part of the same thing, but it doesn't have to negate our personal experience. They can work together, as far as I understand.
And I agree with you. Hmm. So, so lucid dreaming,
Right.
what is it?
So lucid dreaming is the ability to be aware that you're dreaming while you're in a dream. It's the capacity to be consciously aware of yourself as who you are usually in your waking state, and take that consciousness, that same attitude and perception into the dream, versus the way that regular dreams work, where you you're in a dream. Most people are in a dream and they don't know that they're dreaming until they wake up in the morning, and they're like, oh, I had a dream about this and that. But while they were in the dream, they could see all sorts of fantastic elements, like getting chased by monsters or the police, and they never stop in the dream to think, oh, like this is not real. And so they run away from the police, or they run away from the monsters, not knowing that those things are in their head.
So it's like virtual reality, but free.
It's like free virtual reality in 4K HD. It's beyond any graphics that we could hope to create in the near future as far as video games go. And one thing that I find odd is many lucid dreamers explain that their lucid dreams sometimes seem more real than the physical world. And I participate in a forum that is all about lucid dreaming, and someone once posted, I had a lucid dream and it was really weird because the things in my dream seemed more real than the physical world. And people would comment, they're like, what do you mean by that? And almost every time someone makes a post like that, or comment, they don't know how to explain to people how it seems more real, because we're so used to the way reality looks to us that we can't even comprehend a reality that looks more real. But the way they try to explain it is that there's more pixels, like there's more detail, there's more shades, and there's even more colors.